Hello, this is Petty Wop coming to you from Farmington, Missouri. Let's get started on the articles of the Constitution. So first of all, we have Article 1. Now, Article 1 sets up the legislative branch. Now, think about for a second what the legislative branch does. Answer the question that's going to be on Edpuzzle. And back to it. So the legislative branch we know is Congress. Now, Congress includes both the House of Representatives and the Senate. Okay, so we've got Congress up here. This is the legislative branch. Okay, it includes the House of Representatives and the Senate. So requirements and terms. One thing I want you to just kind of file away in the back of your brain is that members of Congress do not have term limits. Okay, so they can run and be elected to Congress as many times as they want. Okay, so starting off with the Senate. The Senate is often called the upper house of Congress, okay, because it's always been a little more prestigious because there are only 100 seats, and it's going to take a little bit more to get into the Senate. So if you want to be a senator, you have to be at least 30 years old. You have to be a citizen of the United States for at least 9 years, and you have to be a resident of the state that you're going to represent. If you need it, pause me, rewind me, and get those 3 requirements. Moving on then to the House of Representatives. Now, the House of Representatives includes a lot more people. In the Senate, we have 100 members. In the House of Representatives, we, of course, have 435. So the requirements to get into the House of Representatives are not going to be quite as strict as they are in the Senate. But if you'd like to be a member of the House of Representatives, you have to be at least 25 years old. You have to have been a U.S. citizen for at least 7 years. And you have to be a resident of the district that you're going to represent. Okay? Again, pause me, rewind me if you need to. So notice that to be a member of the Senate or the House of Representatives, you do not have to be a natural-born United States citizen, meaning you don't have to have been born in the United States. As long as you've gone through the legal steps to become a citizen, then you can serve in our legislative branch. Okay? All right, so moving on to another, something really important in Article 1. It's called the Elastic Clause. Now, in class, we'll look at the specific powers that Congress has. And one of the most important clauses in Article 1 is called the Necessary and Proper Clause, okay? And it's also called the Elastic Clause. And as I talk to you about it, I want you to think about why it might be called the Elastic Clause, okay? So the Necessary and Proper Clause is kind of like the Disclaimer Clause. It's kind of like the fine print in Congress's powers in the Constitution. The Necessary and Proper Clause says that Congress has the authority to create all laws that they deem necessary or proper, okay? So think about it. Why do you think the Necessary and Proper Clause would be called the Elastic Clause, okay? Answer the question on Edpuzzle, then I'll tell you the answer. So the Necessary and Proper Clause is called the Elastic Clause sometimes because it stretches the power of Congress. Okay, if you look at the Elastic Clause or the Necessary and Proper Clause, it's definitely going to increase the power of Congress. It's going to allow them to basically make any law that they want to. Okay, so what does elastic do? It stretches, just like the power of Congress with the Necessary and Proper Clause. So moving on then to expressed and enumerated powers. An expressed power is a power that is specifically listed in the Constitution, okay? So if we can look in Article 1 of the Constitution and we can see a specific power of Congress, that is an expressed power. Why? Because it's right there in black and white. Enumerated powers are kind of the same thing because these are the powers that are numbered in the Constitution. So if we look in Article 1, we're going to see 18 specific clauses that basically say Congress can do this, 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 and this, okay? And we'll look a lot at those whenever we get to our legislative branch unit. So moving on then to Article 2 of the good old Constitution. Article 2 sets up the executive branch, okay? So the executive branch includes the president and vice president, also members of the cabinet. So the requirements to become president of the good old US of A, you have to be at least 35 years old. You have to be a natural-born citizen, which means that you have to have been born in the United States or one of its territories or military bases, or one of your parents has to have been a United States citizen at the time of your birth. And we'll talk about how that works in class. You also have to have been a resident of the United States for at least 14 years, okay? So the terms, we mentioned this whenever we talked about the 22nd Amendment, but in order to be, well, your term as president, of course, we have 4-year terms, okay? So according to the 22nd Amendment, no one can serve as president for more than 2 terms or a total of 10 years. Now you say, okay, Mrs. Petty, 2 times 4 is not 10. You're right, it's not. So how in the world do we get that 10-year limit? Well, let's say that I am a vice president and the president that I'm serving for dies. According to the Constitution, according to my responsibilities as vice president, what do I have to do? I have to step in and I have to finish out his term. So what happens if the president I'm serving under dies or for whatever reason can't be president anymore, and he dies after serving at least 2 years of his term, like maybe 2 years and 1 day? Well, the first thing I've got to do, I've got to finish out his term, and then I can be elected 2 times on my own because that won't allow me to exceed that 10-year window. But what happens if he's like 30 days into his term and then like dies? That would be really sad. But as vice president, I would still have to step in and finish out his term. So I would only be able to run 1 time and be elected 1 time, because if I would be elected more than that, then I'd exceed that 10-year limit. So you say, now hold on, Mrs. Petty. The wonderful FDR was president for a really long time. And I say, yes, you are right, he was. But this amendment was not around whenever he was in office. So last thing I want to talk to you guys about today is the wild card clause, okay? Now, if you've ever played Uno or Skip-Bo or anything like that, you want to get a wild card clause. Why? Because a wild card clause allows you to do whatever you want, right? Well, some presidents have seen the wild card clause of the Constitution to mean that same thing, but it really doesn't. But anywho, in Article 2 of the Constitution, our presidents are invested, according to the Constitution, with specific power. The executive power of the president shall be vested in the executive power of the United States shall be vested in a president, okay? Well, nowhere does it say what the executive power is and what the executive power isn't. So presidents throughout history have used that wild card clause for kind of different reasons, sometimes to increase their authority in specific instances. Okay, so if you guys have any questions, let me know.